What's up guys, I got a brand new video for you today and I am so excited to announce my brand new presets. A lot of you know that I shot Fuji for a long time and now I'm kind of shooting Sony. I've been shooting Sony for a couple years now. And so I took my knowledge from shooting with Fuji and the film simulations that Fuji have, which are amazing, and kind of honed my own presets for Sony. And I've been doing that for a long time. I just worked on them over the last 6 months to get them super dialed in so they'll look amazing on pretty much anything. And so if you are a Sony shooter, Canon shooter, and even a Fuji shooter, because they're not exactly the same, they're kind of like variations of what I like to do when I'm using the film simulation, they're gonna look amazing on your images. They're basically designed for portraits, so around skin tones and skies and stuff like that. So it looks really, really good. I'm gonna jump in here. I got a bunch of different images and we'll go through them and kind of see how they look. I wanna show you guys how they work. And yeah, I kind of hinted at them in my last video. I made like a little sponsored ad. And so this is kind of actually what they're like to use and how to use them. Jumping right into Lightroom CC. You can also use these presets in Lightroom Classic, Photoshop, Lightroom Mobile for iOS and Android. And I show you how to use these presets in those different apps. But we're just gonna use Lightroom CC. I have a bunch of different images here and different cameras as well. So we've got some Sony, some Fuji, some Canon stuff here. And I also threw in some landscape shots because they also look good on landscapes. I did design them for portraits, but you know, presets are presets. So we're just gonna open up the settings here and go down to presets. And I've already loaded these presets in, you can see them here. And if you don't know how to load presets in, I kind of walk you through how to do that in the help documentation. So like I said, these are kind of based off Fuji film simulation. So Classic A1 is based off Acros. And all these presets are gonna be basically adjusted with all the settings except for exposure and white balance. So you can't really predict what someone's white balance or exposure is gonna be. So I just left that. So you're gonna have to adjust that on your own. So for this image, I would say the exposure was dead on, but we could bump it up a little bit. Look how good that preset looks right out of the bat. The one thing I will say is I've kind of given a matte look to all of these presets because that's how I finish my images. I always have a little bit of a matte to them, kind of gives it a little more of a filmic look. It softens up the shadows and stuff like that. And as you can see, this is very similar to the Acros film simulation where you're kind of playing with the reds and softening the shadows. So we zoom in here, you can see what it's doing. It's creamy, it looks great. I'm really happy with that. And if I just go down the list of presets, you'll see how these things change. So Classic C1, can you guess what preset that's supposed to be? Classic Chrome. So if we lower the exposure down a bit, this looks nearly identical to Classic Chrome with a tiny little tweak of what I would do to my actual editing. So that's what this looks like, Classic Chrome. And we've got Classic CN, Classic Negative. So for Fuji shooters, I'm gonna show you in a bit, if you own an older Fuji camera that doesn't have Classic Negative, if you get these presets, you kind of have that Classic Negative look. Again, it's not exactly the same, but I will show you a comparison where I shot Sony with Fuji and put this preset on side by side with the actual film simulation. I'll show you that in a bit. But this is Classic Negative. I'm gonna bump the exposure up a little bit. That's it, looks amazing. Classic CW1. Now this is kind of a warmer, softer version of Classic Chrome. I don't want to compare them to Classic Chrome, so I'm just gonna, from here on out, say Classic CW, that's a preset. You know what it's kind of supposed to be emulated after, a warmer version of C1. So here's C1 and CW, so it's a little bit warmer. I've softened the highlights quite a bit. You can see I pulled them back in here, and we could probably bump the exposure up a little bit. I haven't even touched the white balance yet. Typically, you would adjust your white balance, but I feel like my white balance was dead on here. I'll show you in some images where I feel like the white balance was a little off. So then the next preset is Classic DS. And this kind of just desaturates everything and has a bunch of punch in the contrast. And I feel like this looks great, but I kind of feel like the highlights are a little strong, so pull those back. And we could warm this up. And that looks amazing. Now this preset looks really awesome on landscapes. That desaturated foliage and stuff looks amazing. These types of presets look amazing if you're trying to get like continuity across your Instagram grid and you want to use a similar preset across all the images. This kind of gives it a different vibe. NX1 is kind of more of like a vintage film, I wouldn't even know what to consider it as, but I like what it does with the skin tones and the greens. And NX2 is a little bit more of a punchy version of NX1. I kind of played with the shadow tones and stuff like that, and I think it looks really good as well. And the last preset, Classic W1, is just like a really warm, summery feel. And that's basically it across all the images. So let's jump into another camera. So this is straight out of camera. This is on an A7 III. I think if I hit I here, you can see the info. So yeah, A7 III 24 to 70 G Master. And this image is crazy. Every single preset looks perfect on this image without touching anything. So we got the classic C1. Look how sick that looks. So good. C1, CN1, CW1, DS1, NX1, NX2, W1. Looks so good. Imagine if we bump the exposure up just a little bit. So good. Amazing. All right, so let's go to a Fuji camera. So we got the X-T3. I don't know if you ever watched this portrait session. I actually posted this on YouTube. This is a video that I posted. And this is interesting because this is a Fuji camera now, and those others were Sony's. Fuji has their own film simulation, so why would you even need my presets? Well, watch this. This I might bump the exposure up just a little bit. But this looks nearly identical to classic chrome in my opinion. It's maybe a little different. It's tweaked. Again, it's tweaked because obviously I can't use the exact settings. I don't really know what the exact settings are. Classic negative, CW, DS. This looks sick on this shot. I might bump the shadows up a little bit. But like, the presets are a really good starting base for your own look if you want to tweak these. I think they look great straight out of the preset, but it's up to you. You can really see how this has that vintage warm feel to it. If we bump the exposure up a little bit more, you can see what it's doing with the skin tones and the blues. And if you've been following me for a long time, you know that this is basically how I shoot and the way I like to edit. Okay, so what about Canon cameras? So this was shot on 5D Mark IV. I shot this a couple years ago. Still have my 5D Mark IV. We shot this on the 5D Mark IV with the 35mm f1.4 Mark II. Amazing lens. All right, so as we can tell, this is a little underexposed. I feel like most portrait photographers shoot underexposed like I do, just to preserve highlights. So we're gonna bump the exposure up just a little bit here. And I might warm it up a little. Let's see what classic A1 looks like on this shot. All I can do is put my hands up. It looks amazing. Classic C1, classic CN1. See, this one looks pretty soft. I mentioned that CW was a little bit softer, and this is good for a skin that might be a little bit, you know, not as smooth, but I'm gonna bump the exposure up just a little bit on this. Got the DS1, where the exposure should come back down a little. And this can be warmed up a little. But I feel like this preset out of all of them has the most dramatic look. These aren't filters. I know that a lot of the presets that you guys maybe have downloaded or see, it's always such a drastic before and after, and it's like almost too drastic, like you actually wouldn't use those presets that often. Like most of the times you'll have to dial back the presets, and I feel like these ones I've made are very like straight out of the gate, like polished, where you don't need to like adjust too much. And maybe I'm just saying that because I'm in love with these presets. I want to show you now side by side with Fuji's classic negative and my version of classic negative on a Sony camera. All right, so as you can see, we got the X Pro 3 here, and we were shooting on the 56mm f1.2, my favorite Fuji lens. And this shot was the A7 III with the 24 to 70 G Master. Now they're not going to be identical because I didn't shoot them at the exact same time. I just had her do a run at me and then do another run at me with the other camera. And I kind of did this with intentions of doing something like this someday, even though I shot this like 8 months ago. But as you can see, the white balances are completely different, but the exposures are pretty similar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the white balance down on this Fuji shot because I feel like it's way too warm. That's pretty similar. I could bump the exposure up a little too. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put the classic negative film simulation on this. And if you've never done this on a Fuji camera, you just go in here and you go to camera matching. And depending on what Fuji camera you shot on, it opens up a list of film simulations that were allowed to be used on that camera. So some Fuji cameras don't have classic negative. I heard that Capture One is kind of playing around with that, where you could get classic negative on other cameras, but this is the true classic negative on an X Pro 3, and that's what it looks like straight out of the film simulation, which is why people love Fuji, because that looks amazing. And we're gonna go over to my Sony a7 III and bump up the exposure just a little bit, and then hit it with the CN1 preset. It needs a little bit more exposure and a little bit warmer. And doesn't that look like pretty much exactly like classic negative? Very similar. It has that Fuji vibe. I spent so much time trying to get this look to look so similar. If we go back to the actual X Pro 3 shot here, it might be a little bit warmer. We could dial it back just a little bit. Actually, you know what? I kind of like how warm it is. Let's go back to the Sony and make it warmer. I'm going to actually compare these two side by side so you can see. So we've got the Sony on the left and the Fuji on the right. And it's pretty dang similar. Like there's a little bit of variances to it. Obviously it can't be exactly the same, but I think that I actually like my preset a little more. I like the green tones in the shadows, and I love what the skin tones are doing. It's very, very similar to the X Pro 3 shot with classic negative. And that is crazy. That was kind of my aim for these presets, to get something that was similar, but also tweaked to how I like it. And, you know, I'm excited to see what you guys do with it. So make sure to tag Classic Ports presets when you're posting on Instagram or you use these presets, and I'll feature you. And I want to show what it looks like on landscapes just because I haven't shown it yet. So we'll close this out. I shot this back a long time ago when I was out west. Clearly I had dust on my sensor up here. But let's see what it looks like when you put a preset on it. I think this looks amazing. I think the desaturated one is gonna look best on landscapes, and I see a lot of people use a similar type look to their images. I'm gonna jump over here to one more. This is another shot that I took when I was out west. This is actually Lake Louise down here, which is crazy. I could bump the exposure up just a little bit. I would print that. Like, that looks amazing, just in black and white. I feel like sounds like I'm overselling them, but I'm not. Like, I'm actually really stoked on these. And again, the desaturated. So I feel like if you were to use the DS1 preset, it would give you a very cohesive look across every image. And it's just because it's so desaturated, it's gonna make pretty much any image fit this look. So hopefully you guys like this video. Make sure to pick up those presets. Link is in the description. It's just classicports.com. And yeah, I really appreciate it. If you guys pick those up, it helps support me and the channel. And yeah, it's something new for me. I've never really come out with merch or anything to sell on this channel. I think it's kind of time. I need to start making these thumbs down twice hats available for everybody. But thanks for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you dislike this video, give it a thumbs down twice. Don't forget to hit that notification bell. I'll see you guys in the next one. How to do both of those, use the Lightroom Classic CC racing chair. I'm a gamer and a racer. Gaff tape out of the shot. If you know that I'm the thing, which I'm stuper, take that out in post. Wow, I need a haircut. We just go with this, do a roll with something like that.